Live on WFLA Now. Feel good and live your best life with Bloom Health Club. Here's Gail Guayardo.
There is no doubt infertility leads to significant distress, but a Sarasota mother of 4 is giving couples nationwide new hope. She herself only had a 1% chance. Doctors stacked all the odds against her, but now she is a mom of 4. Joining me now in the Bloom Health Club is fertility coach and the author of her Infertility Success Series, Erica Hoke. Erica, welcome to the Bloom Health Club.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Gail. I'm so excited that we can continue this conversation. And
yeah, it's an important one. It really is. And I'd also like to bring in my producer, Sarah Smith, who will be joining in on the conversation. And I think this is going to grab a lot of attention because going through any type of infertility is so stressful, especially for couples who have to go through IVF. I mean, it's the cost, it's the stress, it's everything that goes with it. And I want to hear a little bit about your personal story because all of the odds were stacked against you. Doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor was like, Erica, it's not looking so good.
right. Years before I got the diagnosis that I needed donor eggs, I was struggling with symptoms, and it took me about 12 years to get my first official infertility or reproductive health diagnosis, which was stage 4 endometriosis. It had progressed to that point. So I had 7 diagnoses in all. I had uterine fibroids, I had ovarian cysts, I had PCOS, I had something called factor V Leiden, which I really want to focus a bit upon that today because it's a blood clotting disorder that affects a lot of women unknowingly and causes infertility. And I had thyroid disease, and I knew that I was going to have trouble getting pregnant, right? I had some of those diagnoses before we went down the path of reproductive medicine, but that was always my backup plan. I always thought, well, I can go to plan B like everybody else. IVF is nobody's first choice, right?
Right.
And so I was told then that I didn't have enough eggs to do a retrieval. I had something called diminished ovarian reserve and that I would need donor eggs. And it was devastating. It took me years to get over talking about it without, bursting into tears. So I had to make a choice at that point of accepting that or doing anything and everything that was in my control to affect my health and improve my health, improve my fertility before we went that route. And that's kind of what my husband and I decided.
So you decided against spending the tens of thousands of dollars on IVF. Like you just said, that's one way, but that's not the way we're going to go.
Right. I couldn't do IVF.
Okay. So you weren't even a candidate.
I wasn't even a candidate outside of donor eggs. So yeah. Okay. So we decided, yes, just to do anything and everything that we could to affect my fertility. And what I found out obviously made a huge impact. And I think that there's just a lack of awareness of how much is actually in your control. Women are super vulnerable when they're going through infertility. And the infertility process itself makes you feel out of control of your body, right? You're having somebody else do things for you and to you, through reproductive medicine. And it kind of makes women, I think, feel powerless. And so a lot of times then they just won't ask the questions, even though they're having symptoms of, like you and I were talking about offset, one of the things that I did was I had tailored thyroid medication because I was still symptomatic. I had thyroid disease. I was taking, Synthroid, and I was still symptomatic. So I really had to advocate for myself, go back and look at my history of my testing, and also, let the doctor know, hey, I'm still just not feeling that great, and bump up my medication, which my doctor was luckily willing to do pretty easily. A lot of doctors will, provide pushback on that.
Well, I think, and Sarah, you can jump in here if you'd like to. Sarah Smith, she helps me conceptualize shows and, write and research guests. And I think it's fair to say that, I mean, while we have an incredible healthcare system in this country, it is one that is very taxed. And part of Bloom, which is a syndicated health and wellness show headquartered here in Tampa, Florida, is about empowering people to take control of their own health. And we hear story after story after story that it took that before people would see any results.
Yeah, and I want to go back to what you said about feeling powerless, because I think a lot of women who are struggling with infertility may tie that to feelings of unworthiness, like I'm not good enough. So how did you get through that or overcome those feelings? Or did you ever overcome those feelings until you actually did get pregnant?
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying to decipher everything that you're saying because it's such a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
There is so much that happens during the infertility process that is so demoralizing as a woman. You know, a lot of women going through infertility will say, this is the one thing that I always wanted to do, or that I'm supposed to be able to do naturally as a woman, and I cannot. And actually, this conversation that we're having right now was the catalyst for the postpartum book, the Infertility Success postpartum book, because there was a lot of unaddressed feelings from the infertility process that then carried over into motherhood. But to get back to your question, one of the things that I really advocate women to do and encourage women to do is deal with the mental health component of infertility. You can't keep stuffing that 800-pound gorilla back in the cage, right? You know, so that's part of the process. That was part of the process of me getting healthy enough in order to get pregnant, is getting therapy, addressing my feelings, not pushing them down, you know, talking to my husband about them. About, you know, how I was feeling, which for some women going through infertility, you know, it's a strain on their relationship and the couple's relationship. And the women are not really the couples are not even really communicating about each of their feelings of inadequacy. So that it cannot be overlooked. The mental health aspect of infertility absolutely cannot be overlooked.
Yeah, it's a critical one to address right off the top. And then other things that you might, I mean, we're going to get into the blood test and the, you know, things that you need to do medically to help maybe intervene or become your own healthcare advocate. But I want to talk about something that really resonated, is that we talk about toxins. We've done entire shows around toxins and how they're disrupting our body and they're disrupting being fertile. Yeah. And that was the one thing that you're like, you gotta get the toxins out of your life. That's the products that you use. That's the foods that you eat. Talk to me more about that, because that's a step that women can start taking now.
Right. While they're waiting for their reproductive endocrinology appointment, while they're waiting for the next thing, that's something that you can do today. And I want someone to hear me out there, because I know how frustrating it is. People will say all the time, women will say all the time, well, that person didn't have to do X, Y, or Z to get pregnant. They got pregnant easily. They didn't have to get rid of all their toxins. Yes, but your body is telling you that you're having problems. So it is critical, if you're experiencing infertility, not to dismiss this as an unnecessary step. So, you know, women, we're sitting here today, we have hair care products on, we have makeup on. The average woman is putting 300 independent chemicals on their body, on their skin a day. That's the average. So there's obviously, you know, more chemical exposure, but that's not even including the food. That's not even including the laundry products. That's not including, you know, possible water contamination and things like that. So it is absolutely critical for you to not get overwhelmed and just take that first step. Like, figure one easy step out for yourself where you can start today.
Okay. And the next thing I want to talk about, which is also something that we talk to doctors about, and yes, some of this you might be able to do it under your insurance plan. you might have to pay for some of this out of pocket. But when you think of the tens of thousands of dollars that you would have to spend on IVF and other treatments to try to conceive, if you have to get a proper blood panel and you need to know exactly what to look at and you have to come out of pocket a little bit for an intensive screening, it's worth the money.
It's absolutely worth the money. And you also have to self-identify your symptoms. I think that you would agree that as women, we are told that our symptoms don't matter. We, deal with a lot of pain for a long time before we get a diagnosis and things like that. So you really have to tie yourself into your symptoms, listen to your body. And yes, if you have to come out of pocket, let's not get to the point where you need IVF. Let's be proactive in our health. Let's get that additional testing done. Let's make sure that the testing that was maybe your OBGYN did already gets in front of your reproductive endocrinologist. I just heard another interview the other day by a reproductive endocrinologist, and he admitted because of time constraints that he rarely looks at previous testing from other doctors. And I think that that's pretty typical. But as a consumer in the infertility world, I think that the expectation is that all those I's have been dotted and those T's have been crossed. And that's simply not the case. You're going to have to do that yourself.
And, you talked about thyroids. You touched on that briefly. And I want to say that you have to, like you said, if you're still not feeling right, keep fighting. I wasn't dealing with infertility issues, but I was dealing with my hair falling out, weight gain, lethargy, not feeling right. And the medicine was never, ever, ever calibrated the right way. And it wasn't until I did pay out of pocket to go sit down for 1 hour with a specialist and comb through meticulously every page of a very expanded blood report that she looked at me and said, "You're over medicated, and your T4 and your T3 do not need the same amounts of medicine." So here I'm walking around shaking, feeling terrible, and the doctor's saying I'm within range.
Right.
And I felt absolutely terrible. And then I got compounded medication, and I'm like a different person. So you have to listen to your body, and you have to be the squeaky wheel.
Absolutely. You have to advocate for yourself. And to go back to the point that we were talking about, you have to get a little angry, I think. You have to care more than anybody else that you're going to take on everything that you can to increase your chances of getting pregnant, increase your fertility.
What about you? You said at the very start of our live stream today that you want to talk about a specific condition or something to test for. What was that again?
It's called factor V Leiden, but basically there is something called a recurrent loss blood clotting panel. So I can't tell you all the different tests that are involved in that, but one of them is factor V Leiden. So that is a blood clotting disorder. I had a blood clot in my leg prior to getting pregnant. So according to, the local Tampa doctor that we saw, the geneticist, up to 80% of the population is a carrier of this.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's huge, right? So you would think that when you go to a reproductive endocrinologist for testing with especially unexplained infertility, that this would be something that they would test for. But day after day, I see women posting, I see women coming to me saying, "I've had 2 miscarriages, I've had 3 miscarriages, I can't make it past 8 weeks, I can't make it, past a certain point," or I've had, it's heartbreaking because they've had stillborn children, and it all leads back to this blood clotting panel, this recurrent loss panel. And sometimes they have to have these miscarriages before the doctor will test them for it. And sometimes they never get tested for it. They have no idea. So I had to have blood thinners for all of my pregnancies to be successful. And after I was diagnosed, I realized that I had had quite a few chemical pregnancies prior to getting that first positive pregnancy test, just unbeknownst to me. So the factor V Leiden is really confusing. Just in a nutshell, it can cause primary infertility, it can cause secondary infertility, it can cause miscarriage at any stage during your pregnancy. And the cure, so to speak, or the treatment for it is the blood thinners. prior to pregnancy. So let's just talk about the gray area, right? So some reproductive endocrinologists, for their IVF transfer patients, they'll just automatically put them on blood thinners. And others, even with a diagnosis of factor V Leiden, refuse to give the medication until 6 or 8 weeks. Many times women have miscarried again before they get the medication on board. So you can see this huge discrepancy just for that one test.
And so you decided, Erica, to put that, and that's just one example. But you decided to put your journey into a book, and not just yours. You shared so many different stories. Why was that so important to you?
It's so important to me that women out there, I hope that there's somebody listening today that's not on social media, that this is the only way that they're ever going to hear about this book. Social media is a really big minefield for people going through infertility. They don't want to see the posting. They don't want to see the birth announcements, the pregnancy announcements, and things like that. So they're not on social media in any way, shape, or form. So this is for that woman. This is for that woman that is alone. She has not told anyone in her life. It's just her and her husband knowing that they are going through infertility. And it's not just our stories told for the sake of a memoir. Every single chapter has tips from a rear view lens where we really wanted to say to the reader, man, stop right here. I wish I had known this. Don't go any further. Get that test done. One of the authors, unfortunately, she actually is a nurse practitioner, so she's in the medical field. She had very few eggs. She was able to do a retrieval. Only after she lost the ability to use her own eggs, did the doctor say, well, maybe we can test for this one test. And it came to find out that was the test that she needed, but it was too late.
So you go in, you ask these questions. I mean, what happens if you face a doctor that's just not willing to budge? Do you just, because this is a big investment. I mean, it's an emotional investment. It's a financial investment. It's an investment of time. And you really need to be sitting face to face with a doctor who's going to hear you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that I help women with all the time, is collaborative care, right? We're not saying that we went to medical school, but we also live in our bodies every day. So no one can know your body better than you. And we have to have that collaborative care. And if you don't feel that if you don't feel heard, I would say if you don't feel heard with any physician, but especially something as sensitive as your infertility doctor, get a second opinion. Keep trying, because there's some really great doctors out there who will listen to you and help you find the gaps that are causing you to not be able to get pregnant.
Sarah, I know you had some questions for Erica as well.
Yeah. Your fourth book talks a lot about faith. So how did your faith play into all of this and staying persistent?
Yeah, it absolutely helped me. There was, it's James 1:2, and it's something that I clung to. It's count it all as joy, right? All the trials as joy. I had to get to the place where I didn't feel like this was some kind of punishment, which many, many women going through infertility feel that they are somehow being punished, that this is somehow somehow like a curse, right? So I had to cling to that when, I was working and I got my cycle, when I didn't, get that positive test, when another month went by. I really had to, I had to know that this was for a greater purpose.
Absolutely.
And what I tell women that I'm helping is that I would be, without my infertility journey, I would be a much less healthy person. And I would not have been able to advocate and help my children through some of the health challenges they have, and helping them lead a healthier life, right? This was a life-changing experience, making these changes so that I could heal my body changed everything, not only for myself, but for my kids, which I have like full body goosebumps right now.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Because and we really, whether you're on a fertility journey or not, I mean, we need to take all of the things that Erica's saying today into consideration just for our overall health. You know, kind of sticking with Sarah's question of, you know, spirituality and religion and what gave you strength, you know, through your journey. I wanted to talk to you about maybe some ways, because you talked earlier about our mental health and ways to maybe find calm. Because while I didn't have infertility issues, I did lose my first child, and I also lost a fallopian tube. And so I wanted to do things to kind of up my chances. So I did fertility acupuncture. There were things that I did to calm myself and in hopes of receiving a child, receiving a pregnancy, just to bring down the stress. And I didn't realize how stressed I was. And I went to an actual physician who also, you know, she practices Eastern and Western medicine.
Yeah.
So, but this is something that's taken seriously as well in the fertility world.
Right. Many fertility clinics will have acupuncturists on site to do acupuncture after a transfer and things like that. Acupuncture played a huge role in my healing from some past trauma and things like that. So I 100% endorse fertility acupuncture, not only as a stress relief, but also to help your hormones. You know, there are women out here, I don't want to get too far down this path, but, you know, Western medicine, if you don't have regulated cycles, if you're not ovulating, they kind of throw their hands up in the air, or they, you know, want to put you on birth control or something like that. That's something where Eastern medicine excels at, you know, is returning your cycle to a normal pattern and things like that. But as far as the stress, you know, you can't just will yourself not to be stressed, right? I mean, everyone going through infertility wants to strangle the person that says you just need to relax, right? And you can't dismiss how impactful your stress is on your hormones. Without getting too deep into that, it really affects them. It really affects your FSH, your LH, both in men and women. And so it has to do with cortisol and all that kind of stuff. But you have to find some stress relieving activities, whether it's acupuncture, whether it's yoga, meditation. But I also teach somatic practices that, you know, when you're at work and you want to just go in the bathroom and cry because you've just gotten your period, you know, a way to help your body calm down through some somatic EFT tapping practices, which, you know,
we're going to actually do an entire show on this tomorrow. Where it goes into production, or is it tomorrow or the following day? Maybe the EFT tapping. That's coming up
tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're taping it tomorrow.
Yeah. So that is something that, you know, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because we try to stay on point with ways that people don't know. Or so talk to me about the tapping, because I don't think that's widely talked about. And we have two health online influencers, and like you said, a lot of information stays buried online that is not talked about in a mainstream media platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I call them pocket tools, right? So you need something that you can do in your car, in the bathroom, when you're having those overwhelming feelings, right? So it just helps your central nervous system to calm down and to relax, basically. It's like a reset. So they'll tell you more about it tomorrow in you know, greater detail. But it really is something that if you're going through infertility, it's worth exploring. And then there's another one called AFT, which is aroma freedom technique. So a lot of times this is associated with essential oils, but you can also do something as easy as peeling an orange, or which has a huge impact. And this is all brain stuff, right? This is your smell activates a different part of your brain than any other way for it to be reached. So that helps you reset too. So both of those are the pocket tools that I give women to help them, you know, through these really stressful situations.
How is the series being received? I'm assuming really well because you keep putting out books and you keep collaborating with top doctors and other healthcare professionals that have been through a similar journey. I mean, it seems like there's been a groundswell of sorts of people that want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you. The books are doing great. And, again, the goal for the books was for women not to feel alone, whether it's during the infertility journey or post-infertility journey where, they kind of get the dream, right? And then none of the things that we have talked about previously, all the stress, all the failed procedures, potentially miscarriages or losses, they stuffed all that away. And when you get the baby and you don't deal with the emotional, what I call the emotional fallout happens, right? You get what you want, and then you have this huge emotional fallout where women are having anxiety attacks. They think everything is, it's a lot of postpartum depression because they think everything is going to kill their baby. A lot of that dysphoria, I think, and so I think that I'm just trying to shine a light on those areas where people feel so alone, because they're separated from their peer groups, right? They were separated during infertility. Now they're new moms, and everyone knows probably that they went through infertility, and they can't say, my baby's not sleeping and I'm at my wit's end, or any of the other things that as a new mom, you would be able to express to your friends or your peers as, just normal motherhood.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the faith walk, so much of that is shame-based, right?
It
People
is.
feel so ashamed. They don't want to talk about it, so.
Yeah, and I there's two things I want to say. I want to talk about the shame of faith, which I do not understand. This is something that Sarah and I talk about regularly, and I also want to talk about that. I'm so glad that you did the follow up with the postpartum because, again, I say I didn't have infertility issues, but I keep telling you things like I lost a fallopian tube. With one of my daughters, I had to stay in the hospital for 3 months. And then I was handed this beautiful bundle of joy. I never dealt with the stress and so many things that happened while I was in the hospital waiting for her. And it did hit me like a ton of bricks. And there was nobody to talk to. And I felt ashamed to say anything because I was one of the lucky ones. My baby was born without a feeding tube. My baby was born, at full weight, full term. So I think that's incredibly important. And then I do want to step into why is it so shameful, or why do people have to hold back having faith? Why do you think that is?
I don't know that I can answer that. I think that it's just an internal persecution, but I do want to say, like, infertility is trauma. If you're going through infertility, infertility is trauma in itself. So let's just get that out there. And so because we don't treat infertility as trauma, I think that there's an I'm going to struggle to find the right word. People take more on themselves, even some of these women listening to this, are probably beating themselves up. Oh, I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. That's not what we're saying here. We're encouraging you to take the steps that you're able to take, but don't persecute yourself for it, right? And I just think that with the faith thing, I don't know that I can say why people feel so ashamed.
Sarah, do you have to? Because you and I talk about this a lot.
I agree with Erica. It's hard to answer, I think, why people feel ashamed, but at least a motto or whatever that I try to live by is that there's always purpose in the pain.
Yeah.
There's always a reason for something. And I think back to, you mentioned James 1:2, but I wanted to mention Genesis, Abraham and Sarah, who were trying for kids for forever in the Bible, and God promised Abraham a child. And then Sarah gave birth to Isaac when she was 90. She was 90 years old. And I just think there's always, again, I go back to there's always a reason for something. You can learn from anything.
Right.
So I don't know if I can answer the ashamed question either. It's hard.
It is hard. But I think what's the most important takeaway from all of this is that you either find a tribe or you pick up these books and you realize that you're not alone, and that you look for ways to heal outside the space that you're in. Because again, you're right, infertility. We actually had a woman on who, unfortunately, her infertility journey ended with her not having children. And she actually wrote a book that's getting all these accolades. And she went out and she just like left her like bustling career here in the Tampa Bay area. And she bought a goat farm. And she went through this incredible journey of healing from her trauma. Right. And I think that that's the big takeaway. No matter how this ends, it is a journey of trauma, and you have to address it. Like you said earlier, you can't keep stuffing the 800-pound gorilla back in the box, because it will rear its head in one way, shape, or form.
Right. Yeah. And if you're ultimately unsuccessful, we know what stress does to the body and creates dis-ease in the body, and so we don't want to have misery on top of misery. You don't, get pregnant. And then all this stress from not dealing with the fact that you were not able to get pregnant and you didn't have the family you wanted, your, dreams cause more illness in your body. Right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the stress again. And because I wanted to ask you, and again, a lot of what Sarah and I talk about comes from putting the show together, researching the guest. Sometimes it's especially with me, my own trials and tribulations of life and health. But back to the thyroid and the stress, when I had one doctor looking at it, the panel, he was like, I was expecting all of these answers about what medication he was going to give me, but instead he recommended cognitive behavioral therapy, because he felt like my hormones were out of whack and everything was going awry, because I was under incredible stress and I was dealing with a family emergency of sorts. And, that stress will make you sick. I mean, regardless of what it is, my thyroid problem started taking care of 2 sick parents. I mean, if you are trying to conceive, you got to manage the stress any way you can, especially if you're going through IVF therapy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you believe in the cognitive behavioral therapy or any kind of therapy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I went, I was with a counselor myself, when I was going through infertility. And I think that having that support of another woman as well was crucial while I was going through infertility. I didn't have my mom, to have that kind of support, family network. And so it was really important.
To close that gap and care. Sarah, any other questions for Erica, or Erica, anything that we haven't asked you that you want our listeners and viewers to know today?
No, I mean, we've covered a lot, but I'm curious to know, I mean, I'll out myself. I'm 23 years old, turning 24 in less than a month. Should someone my age be doing right now? I think I have an irrational fear of being infertile. I've had thyroid problems. I am on compounded medication as well. And I have cycle problems too. So what should we be doing now? I know you touched on it in the beginning.
Question. And this is something my daughters who are your age ask all the time. Yeah. It's a great question.
So what would you say to someone my age?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, because I think it's a myth to wait until you're in your 30s or even ready to start a family. One of the authors was your age, and she realized that they were not getting pregnant. She got married young and realized that they were not getting pregnant, and went through IVF at 23 because she didn't have she wasn't able to get pregnant. But so be proactive. If you think that you are going to have problems, you can get some baseline testing, and that's gonna serve you really well in the future. So baseline testing, like a complete hormone panel and a complete extended thyroid panel. I think it's important when we're talking about thyroid. A lot of times people just think that a TSH, is all that they need. But you really, if you're talking about infertility, you need a extended thyroid panel. something popped into my head. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't mention that, which includes a ferritin count, which is also something low ferritin that I suffered with that I had to get treatment for before I got pregnant. So getting
What's ferritin?
I'm going to circle back to that.
Okay.
But getting a thyroid panel, right? You're having your treatment for your thyroid. I don't know how extensive your doctor does testing. A comprehensive hormone panel, and not ignoring your symptoms, right? You said that you had some irregular cycles and things like that. We talked about acupuncture.
I got a great doc for you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Gail.
Yeah. Acupuncture is huge for restoring normal cycles where Western medicine just really struggles, to find an answer. So those are the kind of things. And then we didn't touch on it a lot, but gut health is important. It plays into the whole toxins. So reducing the amount of processed food, eliminating processed foods, eating a whole foods diet, taking whole food supplements, which is huge, because in the infertility world, you'll see list upon list as long as your arm of supplements to take. But if you're taking synthetic supplements and you're already struggling to conceive, that's compounding the problem. So that's really important. So just taking those same steps as if you were going to be wanting to get pregnant sometime soon, but in maybe a baby step, foundational, kind of way, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of good advice.
Great advice. Erica, you are a gem. We're really lucky to have you here in the Tampa Bay area. And I did want to reiterate, when Erica was in to appear on Bloom or television broadcast, she brought me a book that I gave to a friend of mine that confided in me that she and her husband were going through fertility issues, and they had a healthy baby girl. So
that's amazing.
I know you're changing lives every day, and we really appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge with our Bloom Health Club listeners and viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's super humbling to think about having any kind of impact like that on someone's life, but it's really the reason that I'm here. It's why I'm passionate, about not only the books, but just helping women, be empowered and in any way that I can.
Thank you, Erica.
Thanks for having me so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Erica.
Thanks.